Hello, everyone. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are on the planet. And welcome to this webinar on synodality and an empowerment webinar. Get started on the synod on synodality. Maybe Jose will give just a few announcements in terms of logistics to get started, and then we can begin the session.
Yeah, just a couple of quick tech items. One is that you can access language interpretation, the language interpretation option on your screen, perhaps at the bottom or at the top, depending on the device you're on. There's a button called interpretation. You can click on it, and then you'll have the choice between language or French, and will be adjusted. The audio will be adjusted to the language of your preference. And the second thing is that you can contact me if you have any issues by clicking on the chat box at the bottom or top of the screen, depending on the device that you're on. And if you contact me, I'll try to help. Thank you, Laurence.
Thank you, everyone. So,
je voudrais donner, les instructions en français aussi. Pour ceux qui préfèrent la langue française, vous pouvez accéder à la fonction d'interprétation linguistique en cliquant sur le bouton interprétation sur votre écran et après sur la langue que vous souhaitez entendre. Et un deuxième point, si vous avez des problèmes techniques, si vous avez besoin d'assistance, vous pouvez me contacter à travers le bouton chat ou conversation, aussi sur votre écran, sur les fonctionnalités Zoom. Merci, Laurence.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Jose. And again, welcome, everyone. We'll get started. So maybe just a few words to present myself for those of you who don't know me yet. It's very nice to see so many familiar faces, but it's also very nice to meet so many new faces. So just a few words about me and what I'm doing. My name is Sister Laurence Loubière. I'm a Xavier sister, Sœur Xavier. I was sent to Toronto in Canada in 2007, and I've been here since then. And for the last 3 years, I've started working with the Jesuits. And since March 2019, I'm directing the little service for Discernment in Common, which is a service of the Jesuit province of Canada. And the purpose of the service is to assist Jesuit apostolates and communities, but also other religious communities, with communal discernment processes. So processes in which we help a group to discern its way forward using the spiritual tools and the spiritual approaches of the Ignatian spirituality. We are grounded in a methodology that was notably developed in Canada and the US in the 90s. So we're trying to use this great heritage and to really make the most of it and share this treasure with all the groups that we can. What we do is training sessions, workshops, and of course, the design and facilitation of communal discernment processes. And we've been working with several religious groups in Canada, and notably the Canadian Religious Conference last year, facilitating a Canada-wide scale communal discernment process with about 110 religious communities at the time, 230 participants on Zoom, which was quite something. But it showed that the Holy Spirit works through Zoom, and it was really interesting. So the presentation today will be divided in terms of first moments of input. So input around the Synod, a few elements of information to just be mindful about what it is and what it aims to be achieving. The second moment will be around Ignatian spirituality and the Synod. And then we'll spend some time about how to get involved, like tools and ways in which Ignatian spirituality people, members of the Ignatian family, can get involved. Then there'll be a time of personal reflection. And then you'll be able to share and meet with other people in small groups to exchange some ideas and takeaways. So first, about the Synod. I'm sure you've heard about it already, and you already know some elements. So, but just by way of a reminder. So first, synodality. What is synodality? For the Pope, it's really a call from God. Like it's really something that the Pope received in prayer and feels that the Church is really called to be living and doing for the time moving forward. So it's really grounded in a call that he received for the entire Church. And a call to synodality is basically an invitation to come back to who we are as a Church. Who we are is really important because it's from it flows also a way of doing things, a way of being Church together. And who we are is really the pilgrim people of God, called to be discerning together, where the Spirit is inviting the Church to grow, of course, to fulfill its mission of proclaiming Christ. So it's really an invitation to go back to our identity as a Church and to ground ourselves in there and to learn the ways in which we can actually live this out. And this is very much in the spirit of Vatican II, as you know. You can go back to the Constitution Lumen Gentium, which really spells all this very clearly, that the Church is really the pilgrim people of God. And the decree Christus Dominus, which explains, how the Synod of Bishops works, what it aims to be doing and everything. So these foundational documents really can enlighten the purpose and the way in which this synod is happening. Synodos, synodality, synodos means literally to walk with walk. And so this synod on synodality is really a key moment to reappropriate our identity as members of a pilgrim Church. So it's really important to be aware of this. It's who we are. People of God moving together, discerning together. These are just a few quotations to underline this, taken from the Synod preparatory document. This quote from St. John Chrysostom saying that Church and Synod are synonymous. So really a way of doing tells about an identity. So Church and Synod are synonymous. This call from Pope Francis that the path of synodality is precisely the path that God awaits for the Church of the third millennium. And our journeying together is in fact what most effectively enacts and manifests the nature of the Church as the pilgrim and missionary people of God. So just a few quotes to reinforce what I was just saying about this identity that we need to reclaim and reappropriate and make our own, really. And for the Pope, this synod is about our identity, but also about a deep spiritual attitude that the Pope would really like the Church to embrace. And this is that of humility. What the Church is really aiming for us as a Church is that we become more and more a humble Church, following the humble Christ, and that this would show in all the ways we act and do and live together the mystery of the Church. These words, these quotes, is taken from the vows that the Pope addressed to the Curia just before Christmas. In this address to the Curia, the Pope was saying, during the opening of the Synodal Assembly, I used 3 key words: participation, communion, and mission. And these arise from a humble heart. Without humility, there can be neither participation, nor communion, nor mission. Those words are the 3 requirements that I would like to indicate as a style of humility at which we should aim. So he was talking to the people of the Curia, but more deeply, this is really the Pope's strong desire that the entire church would move from a stance of a church who knows everything and tells everybody else what to do, to a church who really enters the path of humility and let itself be taught by others, be able to serve and join Christ in a place of humility. So in this sense, communion, participation, and mission become three characteristics of a humble church. The way to really understand them is three ways of being a humble church. So in that sense, participation is making sure that all the voices are being heard, that there's space for creativity, for people to bring their talents and ideas, and these are welcome. And this is also ways in which authority becomes a service when it really empowers people to grow, to share, to become who they are, and to share their ideas and thoughts and talents. In the same way, communion is, of course, being centered on Christ, but talking to one another and discerning together to foster this sense of journeying together. And for the people who know a little bit of about communal discernment, and spiritual conversation, you know that when we talk to one another and discern together in this way, using the tools of spiritual conversation, communion grows in a group. This is where the group really becomes one and can feel and act as one. So it's really meant also to be growing the communion within the church so that we would continue to journey as one, as the body of Christ. And it means, of course, opening up to diversity, which is another way of being inclusive. And the church is meant for mission, of course, and therefore the mission, its expression also grounds itself in this deep attitude of humility, acknowledging our poverty, our need to learn from others, our desire to serve the poor, to become close to the poor and to serve them, our desire to be able to meet all types of hungers, not just physical, but also hunger for meaning, hunger for hope, and acknowledging our need of the poor, needing to hear their voice and acknowledging that we're not self-sufficient. So these three dimensions, in the Synod document, you hear a lot about participation, communion, and mission. And humility is really the key to understand deep down what they truly mean. What the Pope is also hoping for us and inviting us strongly to do is really to take the opportunity of this synod to step out of our comfort zone. Another quote from him, again in this similar address to the Curia: if we remain enclosed in our convictions and experiences, the hard shell of our own thoughts and feelings, it will be difficult to be open to that experience of the Spirit, which, as the Apostle says, is born of the conviction that we are all children of one God and Father of all. So what the Pope is hoping for us is really this experience of getting out of our comfort zone and having a spiritual experience of conversion, a spiritual experience of openness to the otherness of the others. So it's a good opportunity also for us to realize that and to do it. The two main questions, the main question, but it's actually two questions that the Pope is asking the Church to discern is how does this journeying together, which takes place today on different levels, from the local level to the universal one, allow the Church to proclaim the gospel in accordance with the mission entrusted to her. So it's an opportunity to reflect on how and to what extent we journey together. We experience this synodality already in the church life that we have. And what are the steps that the Spirit invites us to take in order to grow as a synodal church? So what are the things, the calls that the Spirit is inviting us to hear to grow as a synodal church, so to embody more and more this way of being church. And to help the discernment, the secretary of the Secretariat of the Synod is proposing in the preparatory document 10 thematic entries, like 10 possible themes through which you can dive into the questions that that are called for discernment. And these are the 10 different themes. So the first one is about the journeying companions, like wondering like who are the people we're journeying with, who are the people we reach out to, who are the people we don't reach out to. How do we listen together? How do we speak out? How do we celebrate? How are we co-responsible in the mission? How is our church engaged in dialogue with society? How are we connected with Christians of other denominations? What about authority and participation in our church? What about discernment processes? What about training ourselves in synodality? So there's a full series of questions that we've also highlighted in a single document. We will speak just afterwards about a resource page on the website that we've prepared, but we've also put this information online. So you'll find more information about the questions in these different entries. But these are possible ways of addressing the question also. In terms of timing and steps, we are now in what's called the diocesan phase of the Synod, which is this moment where all the parishes and dioceses of the world, the local churches, are being asked to reflect together, to get together, to talk to one another, to reflect, and to draft contributions. And these contributions are to be sent to the local dioceses so that at the level of the diocese, there's a kind of synthesis that can be done, and then all the dioceses will send their synthesis to the bishops' conferences in the different countries. And they have to do so that on the 15th of August, the bishops' conference have to send their synthesis to Rome. And in September, the Secretariat of the Synod will produce the first working document, which is called Instrumentum Laboris. So the first working document, which will be sent again to the continental and regional assemblies. There will be 7 assemblies also. From these assemblies, we'll go back to Rome 7 reports in March 2023. Then the Secretariat will create a second working document, which will then be discussed in October of 2023 at the Synod of the Bishops. So we're really now at the stage of the diocesan phase, and given the deadlines that are going to take place between the diocesan phase and the bishops' the synthesis from the bishops' conference, there's not a lot of time. So it's really an opportunity to start acting soon on all this. And what is at stake so in the Synod? So given what the Pope is encouraging us to do, given the fact that synodality is really about who we are and reclaiming who we are, so a big purpose, a big objective of the meeting of the Synod is really the conversation exercise in itself. It's really the opportunity for us to reflect on the Church and its mission, an opportunity to listen to the Spirit in our conversations with one another, and an opportunity to enter a path of conversion through conversation. So this is really interesting, like this conversion through conversation. So by talking to one another, experimenting this, having this spiritual experience that can transform us and the way we relate to one another in the Church. So it's about reclaiming our baptismal identity. It's about then embracing discernment in common spiritual conversation as the core way of being a missionary church. It's meant to open new paths, like reaching out to the peripheries, embracing diversity, fostering communion, healing divisions. And in doing so, it's really also transforming the culture of the church and moving away from clericalism and therefore an abuse-prone culture. So it's also the Pope's desire to transform the church from within and to help us move away from clericalism and all the abuses that this might have been fostering, because it puts us on a different path, a different way of relating to one another, and in relations that are more just and more adjusted. A purpose is also to hear the voices that usually go unheard, to be attentive to the voices that are on the margins. So an opportunity to have a form of open mic. And ultimately, it's also helping us to strengthen our faith in God, because then we can learn to discern God's constant action in all things, in all events of the world, even if sometimes the news might seem a little daunting and a little overwhelming. But it's meant to help us also discern God's work in the world, help us move us out of worrying, but into a discernment mode. So being attentive to how God works in the world. So 2 quotes to kind of underline this, again, taken from the Synod's document. This time it's called a Vademecum, which is kind of a handbook with all types of elements and processes. And what they state is really that the whole synodal process aims at fostering a lived experience of discernment, participation, and co-responsibility, where a diversity of gifts is included and taken into account. And the purpose of the Synod is not to produce more documents, but to help people really live something and rekindle our hope, stimulate our trust, bind up wounds, weave new relationships, learn from one another, build bridges, enlighten minds, etc., etc. So it's really meant to help us ground ourselves into our Christian identity, and from there to find the energy to develop new relations, new projects, and a new way, renewed way of being a church that journeys together. So now the second element of this presentation around Ignatian spirituality and the Synod. How do these two resonate with one another? So as you know very well, at the core of Ignatian spirituality is really this conviction, this deep belief that God is at work in all things. And the Ignatian spirituality is grounded in a Trinitarian theology of God, a God who works in all things, and the Trinity at work in all things. Of course, St. Ignatius mentions it and invites us to pray with this in the exercises, and very specifically, for example, in the Ad Amorem Contemplatio, at the end of the exercises, which really crowns the exercises, and inviting us to see how God really works, labors in the world, in all God's creation. God is at work and invites us to contemplate, God the worker. And also this deep belief that the Paschal mystery, the life, death, resurrection cycle, is really at work in our personal lives, but also in the corporate lives of institutions. In that sense, there's always in our lives things that are new and emerging, and things that are dying, and that we need to let go. So it's this invitation to embrace life and to discern in all circumstances of our life what is life-giving and that we should be embracing, and what is, on the contrary, stuff that we need to let go of, because we don't need them anymore. We need to let go of these things. And this mystery is at work both in personal and the corporate life. And of course, a spirituality that invites us, in order to discern how God is working, to pay attention to the motions of the Holy Spirit, to open ourselves to the motions of the Holy Spirit, in a spirit, of course, of discernment. And Ignatius insists on personal and communal discernment to be able to discern how God is inviting us to grow and to serve God. Again, grounded in the belief that God communicates God's self directly to the soul. So we need to have the means, cultivate the means and this attention to how the Spirit is moving in our hearts, so that we can become collaborators of God, like be able to work with God in the world, partake in Christ's mission, and be able, in that sense, to align all our energies and all our actions, intentions, operations, as we ask in the preparatory prayer, with the work of the Spirit already at work in the world. So what we're trying to do by listening and discerning is to attune ourselves to the work of the Spirit already at work in the world and orient our energies and wills and desires with the work of the Spirit who is already there. The way Ignatius also envisions the mission is to follow Christ in humility. The Magis is, looking for the Magis for the more is actually a path of conversion. It's a path of conversion to be placed and with the humble Christ in his mission. So, as you remember, most probably from the major meditations in the exercises, like the call of the King, the invitation is really to labor with Christ and to share in his pain so as to follow him in glory. It's the invitation to choose the standard of Christ and therefore asking for the grace to imitate Christ by enduring all sorts of poverties, humiliations, contempt, since from these results humility. It's aiming to be part of the third class of persons. It's preferring the third way of being humble and embracing poverty. So the core of the exercises is really to place ourselves, as followers of the humble Christ. It's a path of conversion. It requires us to really move out of our selfish ways of doing things, to move and to be able to follow and surrender to the humble Christ. So there's also this same dimension at work in the core of the spiritual exercises. And there's a shared horizon between the way in which Ignatius envisioned how the society of Jesus would be and fulfill its mission, and what the Pope is envisioning for the Church, in the sense that Ignatius envisioned the society of Jesus as an apostolic body centered on Christ, moving under the motion of the Spirit, and also animated from within by a constant conversation within. And you remember most probably how Ignatius wanted all the Jesuits to write to one another, even if the letters would take like several years to reach their destinations. He really wanted to ensure that this constant conversation was a ways in which the unity, the communion, and the communal discernment would be nourished in this way. So conversation from within and conversation without, with all other stakeholders and partners in mission, to discern unceasingly the signs of the Spirit in the signs of the time. So to be able to discern God's work, both within our souls and in the world. There's this continuum between what happens within us and what happens in our communities and what happens in the world. And of course, inviting us, and this is also part of the exercises, to feel with the Church, develop a sense that we move together as one, not as, satellites of one another, but in unity and in humility of service. So trying in all things to love and serve. Having this willingness to be taught, eager to put a good interpretation on a neighbor's statement, as he recalls in the exercises. And therefore a whole way of proceeding and being missionaries that reflects this identity. And I just put a little picture of this document called Pilgrims Together, which is the apostolic planning document of the province, the Jesuit province of Canada, that really, resonates with this vision of a pilgrim province, like a province really moving together with all its members on pilgrimage, listening to the Spirit and adopting these deep spiritual attitudes of humility and listening to one another. And that's what we try to live as a continual discernment process within the province. In a joint declaration on the Ignatian spirituality and the Synod, Father Arturo Sosa, who is the Superior General of the Jesuits, and Sister Jolanta Kafka, who's the director of the USJ, which is the body that gathers all the female religious members in the world. They did a joint declaration on this, and what they stated is this need to embark in a conversion journey. Like there can be no discernment without a constant renewal of life, without a permanent reformation of life. So it's a journey of discernment, which is also the journey of conversion. And so for us, as Ignatians, it's an opportunity to reach out, to open ourselves to others. As Ignatians, there's a little bit of a temptation to remain in our circles where we're kind of comfortable, where everybody speaks our language, where we have maybe little or no interaction with other structures. So we might end up feeling a little bit self-sufficient. And so the Synod is a great opportunity to reach out, to meet others, to be creative, and to share who we are and the gift of Ignatian spirituality in that sense. So that's also an opportunity to kind of broaden our horizons and reach out to people with whom we have little or no interaction. And we have some tools, of course, some privileged means that we can share that help us to be attentive to the work of God, the work of the Spirit in our own lives, in the world. And this is, for example, a short tool, which is a tool to review events or experiences. And you can use this and propose other people to use this. But this is a very simple chart, but can be really powerful in reviewing and trying to discern how the Spirit is inviting you to move through the events of your life. So you can, for example, notice, gather a few events, events that you're most grateful for, events that you're just grateful, events that on the contrary, you're not that grateful, and events that you're not grateful at all. But in all of these instances, it's an opportunity to listen deeply to what the Spirit might be telling you, what stirrings might the Spirit be leading you to. So you can start with describing, the event, what happened, what feelings that this trigger, why you understand this, why you have this interpretation, try to have some form of interpretation of why you feel in this way, and then try to assess whether this interpretation is valid, and then to try to decide what to do accordingly. And this tool will be accessible online also, so you don't have to worry too much, but this is just to show you an example of something that might be useful. And of course, there's the process and the practice of spiritual conversation, which is a structured process of conversation that allows us to set up the conditions to listen together to the promptings of the Holy Spirit. It requires intentional speaking, which means speaking with what I feel, what I experience, not ideas, theoretical or abstract ideas, but really what I feel, what came to me in my prayer, what, grounded in this experience. It requires active listening. So listening not just to what the other person is saying, but what the other person's words are triggering in me. It requires paying attention to the motions of the Spirit in oneself, in the group, and experiencing these consolations and desolations and being able to name and recognize them, being able to see whether you experience the fruits of the Spirit in the conversation. And the purpose of a spiritual conversation is also to help you to move from me, the level of my personal experience, to we as a group. This is what we heard, this is what we choose to be doing. And it's a great tool in that the structured process makes sure that it's not my opinion versus your opinion or her opinion, but it's meant to help us listen together to one another, listening together while listening to one another. So it's really powerful in that sense, because it turns us towards the same direction, which is listening to the Spirit in all of our discussions, all of our words and conversations. The way in which you do this is to, usually it's done in 3 rounds. You invite people to share what they have prepared about the fruits of their prayer, because usually it's beforehand, people have to pray and prepare a little sharing. On the second round of conversation, you invite participants to share about what touched them most in the first round. And in the third round, we invite people to share on what seems to be converging or emerging at this stage. And to facilitate, going back to these methodologies, you will find also on the webpage that we've prepared some tutorials by way of, sheets that present how to do this and how to do a spiritual conversation face-to-face, and how to do also an online spiritual conversation, given the times that we are going through where online activities are really important. So you'll find both presentations and tutorials also on the website. And then when you combine several spiritual conversations, you can have a whole communal discernment journey. You can set up a process of communal discernment by combining together, a series of spiritual conversations to discern the specific questions. This can be done online, and it combines personal prayer, spiritual conversations in small and large groups to discern the specific questions. So in the context of the Synod, it could be starting with reviewing our experience of being a church, and then step by step discerning where the Spirit is leading us to grow and how to live this out. And we will see in the different means a possible path of communal discernment. So now getting to the part of getting involved in this Synod. So I've mapped out just a few suggestions, like there's no ways in which this list would be exhaustive, but it's just like little starters to get you thinking, to get you acting, to get you choosing what you want to be doing and combining the different elements maybe together. So first element could be around prayer, then around reviewing your life in the church, mapping your connections to the church, discerning your involvements, how best to be involved, join forces, venture out of your comfort zone and reach out to new people, set up a new project, and of course, send your contributions. And we will look at each one of these in a little more details. So in terms of prayer, of course, it's really important to pray for the Synod and to ground ourselves in prayer in whatever our endeavors for the Synod. The Synod has proposed this Ad Sumus prayer, which is the prayer that was prayed at the beginning of each of the sessions at Vatican II. But you could also be praying, with the mystery of the Church, going back to the big texts of Lumen Gentium, the text of Vatican II, which is full of images and very powerful statements about who the Church is meant to be and how it's meant to be living its identity. Praying with the Acts of the Apostles, of course, with the letters of Paul, with the Origen's commentary on the Song of Songs, for example, which is a very neat commentary where Origen is using all kinds of images to describe in the relationship with Christ what is happening to the individual soul and what is happening to the Church, and drawing the comparison all the time between the individual level of the Christian and the Church. And it's very beautiful if you have the opportunity to find this text. There's also websites and applications that have been designed. And so there's a website really offering resources to pray for the Synod. And the Click to Pray app also proposes some things. There's a website and there's an app that you can refer to. So ideas to find prayers and pray for the Synod. A second dimension is something I've put together, which is a kind of reflection tool, prayer and reflection tool that's meant to help you review these dimensions of your relationship to the church. So a few questions around your desire for this Synod. You know, what do I desire? What's my deep hope? What's my hope for the church, etc. My history in the church, reviewing, you know, the sacraments you received when you were kids, the consolations, desolations, my place in the church today, how can I step out of my comfort zone, the mission of the church today. And you will find this document online also. We put it as a resource. It can be used both personally and also within a group. You can use this as material, you know, to start prayers. You can use this as materials for communal discernment to nourish like different steps, and we will see this. But it will be available online. Then the invitation to map your relations to the church. Okay, how are you connected with the local church? Which parishes, which religious communities are around you? Which charities are you connected with? Which movements, which other communities? How is this relationship happening? Is this in person, online? Just to get a sense, composition of place, so to speak. But to do a little mapping exercise, how am I connected to the church? What are these relations? This could be a simple exercise, but also interesting to discuss with others. And then, of course, the step of discerning how and where to get involved in the Synod. You can use your mapping exercise to gather information also about what is existing in the local initiatives around you, and then discern where you can best get involved. And the criteria you can use this: where is the greatest need? Where can I bear more fruit? What are the gifts that I can bring to the initiative? What will lead us out most of our comfort zone? What are the voices that need to be heard? And what time can I dedicate to this? This is also an important criteria to take into account. So an opportunity to reflect and to discern, okay, and to set out on a, you know, map out a little path for you to get involved. And of course, you can join other people and you can join local initiatives. And the invitation is really to do it also in a synodal way. So to walk with others, to join others, to invite, to collaborate, not arrive with prepackaged solutions or the tools, but really to suggest, to join the conversation wherever it's possible. The idea is to exercise a form of leadership from within the local church rather than in parallel, if possible. So reach out to the diocese, reach out to the local parishes, reach out to the people who are already doing something and ask if you can join, propose ideas, propose training on spiritual conversation, for example, if the need arises. And you can also reach out to another community, another group, which can be Ignatian or not, and share thoughts, insights, you know, start something together. So it's an idea also to collaborate and join forces with others. The invitation to get out of our comfort zones, this can be done also based on your mapping exercise. Okay, who are your peripheries locally? Are there any neighboring Christian communities, other denominations? Are there groups that whose voice is rarely heard in the church, which would be interesting to reach out to? People with different views on the church. It might be interesting to just get to know them better, propose to pray, share together, open new paths. Like it's an invitation to dare and venture out of our circles. And also to start a project. Okay, maybe what do we have to offer? What do I have to offer? Where's the greatest need? You could set up prayer meetings. You could set up also a full communal discernment process with a series of spiritual conversations in your community or with a group on Zoom or in person. You can design the prayer sheets based on the review exercise. Take this as an example. And I have mapped a possible, communal discernment process that would, through different steps, allow you to respond to the questions, but in a way where you have the time to really go into the different dimensions and reflect and learn from this. So it could be start with your desire for the synod, reviewing your personal history in the church, the recent history of the church, the ruts in which the church might be stuck, then listening to the calls and listening to the means to concretely live out these calls. So this is a possible path that can be designed also. And then send your contributions to a local diocese, preferably, but sometimes there's ways in which also religious communities can send contributions directly to the religious conference. I've just learned that Canadian Religious Conference, for example, is giving the possibility for religious communities to send their contributions, but by February 1st, so it's approaching fast. And as we saw, there's a lot of compilation and synthesis that needs to be done, so pay attention to the deadlines and try to plan accordingly. And there's also, in last resort, the possibility for religious communities, lay movements, and other groups to send their contribution directly to Rome, to the General Secretariat. But it's interesting anyhow to make sure that your voice is heard locally, so that also the local church can take this into account, because it's also important that the bishops locally hear what is going on beyond and besides the parishes and the dioceses. So it's also interesting in this respect. So the invitation for you is really to take some time to use these tools, these presentations, these elements, to take time to compose your synodal, there's a little typo, synodal journey, and to plan ahead, to plan what you want to be doing, to sit down and reflect, and then to move forward, to get started. And to finish, I would just like to quote again this call from Cardinal Cherney, who's a Canadian Jesuit who was in Canada recently, and who, through an interview, really stated this, that his real hope is that every Jesuit house, every Jesuit work, including Jesuits, lay colleagues, and other religious, but this includes the entire Ignatian family, will offer these gifts to serve the synodal process. And at the local and diocesan level, I hope they will not wait to be invited to some important meeting, but that people will look around and say, how can I help? How can we help? We have these gifts, we have this tradition, we have these ways and means. How can we help the local parish, the local dioceses, the bishops' conference to get going and keep going in a synodal way? And in the presentation, there's also the link to the full text of the Cardinal Cherney. So, and just before we move into the questions, I just want to share the webpage, on which you will find the resources. It's going to be online today, so you will find all the resources and also the presentation and the recording of the presentation. And so this is what the page looks like. So, and there's going to be a page in French and a page in English. So I'm showing you the page in English where you can find all the tools. So you will have the presentation, the slides, but also the recording. You will have the tool to review the events. You will have the tutorials on spiritual conversation in person with the tutorial, and online for this. There's 2 documents for the online spiritual conversation. Then we've kind of gathered the 10 themes for the synod, so you don't have to go through all the documents. And this is the prayer tool where to review your church experience, which you can use as prayer sheets, basically, that can allow you to pray. And you can, really use this with the different themes. There's also some possibilities to review specific events that are included. And you can use this personally or as a community. So this is a possible way of doing. And going back to this, you'll find other resources, like the Synod's key documents and some resources. And you can, of course, contact me if you need more information. So that's this will be online very soon. So we'll take just a moment now to get some questions. You can type them in the chat. Before we move into the small groups where you'll have another chance, before we move into the time of personal reflection, and then small groups. So yes, you can send the questions. So I see a first question that says that you mentioned due date of February 1st, 2022. This due date was for the Canadian Religious Conference, which is the due date for religious communities, religious orders. And there's a specific, path for religious communities. So February 1st is just for religious orders in Canada. So I don't know about other groups. So you would have to be in touch with your local diocese to make sure about their deadline, and then figure out, depending on which channel you're going to be using, what is the deadline for the different ways.
Laurence, there's a question by someone asking if there are any communities or works. I assume they're referring to the Jesuit province, but I guess it's helpful to give other examples. Any communities or works already doing something?
I know of initiatives, but for the time being, I don't know within the Ignatian circles really what's going on. So I'm not sure at this stage, but this is something we're going to figure out in the coming weeks to make sure that things are happening. A question, is the Jesuit province in Canada going to send a common report? This is a question we're going to discuss, I guess, internally very soon. I know that Gilles Mongeau de Socius is kind of thinking about these things, so we're going to be looking at this, I think. Who do we send our responses to in Toronto? I think it's the diocese, the archdiocese directly. You will find on the archdiocese website an online questionnaire. So either you fill the questionnaire, or I guess you can send directly your contribution as an attachment or something, and maybe they will be able to process it.
There's a comment I just received. It's originally in French. Several people in my church that I'm in touch with are very committed to the church, but are also disappointed and hurting. Telling them to start by praying is not going to work well for them. I think there is an acknowledgement of their disappointment and suffering to be heard.
Yes, of course. Of course. I think this is a very important thing. The invitation to pray was also for yourself. I mean, to get you started and to get your community started. But of course, all these tools and propositions are meant to be adjusted depending on the people and their, you're going to be working with and journeying with. So a question saying like, our diocese has a site for this, but it is more personal, answering questions on the site. Yes, this is an example that we've seen in several, for example, Canadian dioceses, just putting an online questionnaire. I think definitely if you have the possibility of joining a group and journey together and discern these questions together, and then potentially send your contribution as a group by way of the online questionnaire saying that you're a group, or reaching out to the people in the diocese saying that your contribution doesn't necessarily fit completely the questionnaire, but this is what you've been discerning and talking about. I guess they can take this into account.
A couple questions I just received. One is, how can people whose parishes are not participating and whose bishops are not participating in the synod send their reflections to Rome?
Well, they can always do this if the diocese is not really acting on anything. There's the possibility to reach out to Rome directly and have your voice heard. But the invitation would be to find maybe another diocese or another group that might be a way for you to join forces with or to get in touch with and to send your contributions.
And then there's about a lot of questions coming in. The next one is about the website. Will we be able to share the website with our diocese in the US?
Yes, of course. The website, the resources are really meant to be, open source. So feel free to use these resources as needed. They need a little bit of introduction, however, because they are designed, with the background of Ignatian spirituality in mind. So it would be important also to present them in this way. But of course, they can be used in different contexts.
And just an FYI, in case some haven't seen it, I posted the links to the website in English and French. The recording of the webinar is the only element foreseen that it's missing still, and will be added as soon as it's available. We'll also share it through email.
There's no actually a very precise format in terms of the reports. I see a question that is mentioning, like, is there a specific format for the reports? There's no real format that I've seen. The idea is to respond to the 2 questions and to send your contribution in this way. So, but what I would like to suggest now is to go into personal time of reflection so that you have an opportunity to reflect already at this stage and then spend some time in the small groups. Yes.
Yeah, and for those who sent their questions and who didn't have the time to answer, you can contact Laurence. That's right, Laurence?
Yes, of course. Don't hesitate to contact me during or after the presentation. So now what we suggest is for you to take some personal time, so you can, close your video and your mic. We'll take like 10 minutes. So we'll come back at 12:10, and then we'll be in small groups for about 20 minutes. And then we'll come back at the end. Okay. Welcome back to the big room. This is a moment before we end the session today for, comments or questions. You can use the chat. You can try to wave and use whatever means you have to signal your presence, and we can try to figure out who wants to speak. But it's just like, okay, what do you feel inspired to share at this moment, or comments you would like to do, or whatever.
I'm Sue, and we had a recorder in our meeting, and it was Mark, so maybe he could share. You're muted.
Mark, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, okay.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. Yes, my name is Mark, and I am not an Ignatian, and I have worked a long time with the Basilians, and also I was the committee leader of l'Arche with Jean Vanier of the Committee of Stratford in Ontario. So that's what my root is. The word that what struck us today, and I tried to speak for the group, and I could be wrong, was away from clericalism. That somehow the church is like a pyramid, and it weighs on us, and the weight of the Spirit is not present, and we should listen to someone of our group in closing said, you know, I'd like to recall the words of Thomas Merton, who said, who lived on the fringe of Catholicism and yet was called to stay. And for many of us, that's a bit the feeling we have, that in other words, the structure has become so strong that the Spirit is no longer present. Well, we all have a thirst for the Spirit, and we're looking for a place to pray.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just found it very exciting to speak to somebody from PEI, and the two other women were from Toronto. And it's just, this is what I think the process is about too, is the process of being face-to-face with one another. All of us are here because we really want to be here. So, and that hopefully will be our smaller groups. And it was nice to know that you could go right to the Synod through the Secretariat, because even with my group, the small group in our archdiocese, they were concerned about what would end up on the table in Rome.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the comment. Bert, you wanted to say something?
Yes, for me, what's exciting is we're learning to listen to the Holy Spirit, not in the depths of my heart and my quiet prayer, but in the wide community of a very diverse world population. And that's exciting for me about the Synod.
Thank you.
May I?
Sure.
Just two things. Mark, I am sympathetic with your comment on clericalism, but I'd like to say that I don't really want to replace Kevin Kelly. And my picture is up there, and I'm just wondering, did he get lost? I'm Kay Duffin.
I have no idea. I think he had to leave. I think he had to happen. I think he had to leave, but don't worry, we kind of
okay,
we didn't think anything happened to him.
but I'm registered somewhere there.
I don't know exactly how these identity things happen on Zoom. It's so scary. But...
Well, while I have the yellow frame here, I'd like to say that in my group of 5, I think almost everybody commented on the fact that we loved the presentation. It was so well done and so on. But we ask, how will we, in the short time that is given to us, get this out? This seems to be the time factor and so on. So we were concerned a little bit, even though we were just so happy with the presentation and the whole.
Thank you. Yes, indeed, the timelines are short. And myself, when I was doing this, I was like, oh my God, I should have been doing this presentation like a few weeks, months back, so that we would have the time to catch up with the actual deadlines of the process. So, I mean, whatever we're going to be able to do is already great, I think. And I think the idea is also that once we get started, we know that we're planting seeds. It's not as if we're going to, reform the church in like 2-3 months. I guess the fruit is really in the conversation itself, in getting started in experiencing this. And we have a super opportunity to experience this. And if people experience this and feel, oh, this is an interesting way of proceeding, an interesting way of doing this. This is how you can adopt, new ways of doing things locally and maybe start journeying differently, a little bit differently. And a little bit differently is already maybe going to bear some fruit in the longer term and bring us to a bit of a different way of being church. So I would encourage, any sort of possible action. There can be the short-term responses to the Synod and the contributions, but it may also open a path of reflection of how we do things locally, how we do things in our own church. And this on the long term may be transformative also. So
what comes next? What after today?
Well, what after today is you can go online and, find the presentation, find the resources, and then try to, with all these elements, look around you, what is happening, what is being done, and take the time to reflect, okay, what makes the most sense for me to be doing from now on? Like, should I, am I part of a group? Can we initiate something? Can I join the diocesan, process if there's any? what makes the most sense, basically. These are just elements to get you started, and then for you to sit down and reflect and strategize. Okay, what's my best path moving forward, given all my constraints? Yeah, Charles?
Yeah, our group was very, we're just very grateful for the presentation. Oops, what happened? Can you hear me?
Somebody started sharing their screen.
Oh, okay. But one thing that struck us, most of us, was that you talked to the connection between being a humble church, the conversion that's necessary, a humble church with participation, communion, and mission. And that is, I think, very important. So we were struck by that. We only had time to do one round.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So, but my question is, and this is my own, is we have to find a way that we can be able to present the reports. Here in Halifax, we have February 5th. It's not possible to get it all done. So that would be a very urgent thing for me to find, for the province, to find ways that we can share our report beyond the diocese, but with the Conference of Bishops, because some of them are not doing anything, some of them are too fast, and so I would ask you to really consider doing that.
Yeah, we'll take this into account, that's for sure. Yeah, Cynthia, I see you want to say something. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, there. Thank you. I just want to apologize to everybody that I'm off screen there. It's because I'm in my sick bed. But I just wanted to follow just on the fact that we do have, time is prescient and everything. But it is such a beautiful report. I think that we're going to use it, but in a sense, I think it still has a purpose, because I think process is going to be so key in the next, year. So that I think it's just a great template for us to take everywhere. And I plan to be sending it to my bishop, just as, something that, the perfect model thing. And that's what we're aspiring to. And that hopefully we can, have that sort of filter down into whatever we're doing. So it's lovely work. And I think, we should get it out there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Anne, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, our group also really affirmed the presentation and the gentle manner in which it was presented, so clear, so informative. But one thing that I think is important, probably all of us on this call are churchy kind of people. And the thing is designed to include everybody, all those peripheral voices. How are those people ever even going to find out that this is happening? I think that's a big challenge.
Very much so, very much so. So the idea is maybe to reach out, see people. Yeah. Tom, you wanted to say something? Tom and Jane, but you're mute. Yes.
There we go.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Oh, good morning. I am Tom's wife and do think independently, and I've enjoyed the presentation this morning. I'd like to follow up on what I think Charles said. We're all so keen to participate and share our ideas, and we all have lots to share, that's for sure. But I think I don't know how it would be possible, but it would be really wonderful if all the submissions were available online, not especially in Canada, so we could use that with our own church here, but around the world. I just don't want to send them all into these bishops, have the bishops keep them all to themselves and choose what they want to use for their purposes, when it would be so useful if we had access to what everybody said and we could use these documents to advocate for a truly community church.
That's an idea.
I agree.
Very quickly, Dina and Jill, because we're nearing the end of our session.
Yes. Okay, quickly. I just had an idea, and the challenge was given to us by that this is not the end of the whole process of looking at the church with a greater and bigger lens. The idea was that I have been meeting with a group of 16 people here in the diocese. No, I shouldn't say the diocese. It was open to the public. 16 people that are not necessarily churchy people. And we've been looking at listening to Indigenous voices. And our process, we've gone through several of the units now, and we will end soon, next month, I think, to cover the 11 units in there, listening to Indigenous voices. These people are deeply committed to looking at the social context that we find ourselves in, and also the institutional church. Mm-hmm. And with that thing in mind, that that I would get out of my comfort zone, in a sense, when we complete this, to offer this highly committed people on social reform some of the resources that you have presented to me.
Of course. Thank you.
Where are you?
I'm in PEI.
Sorry, Dina, quickly, and we'll...
Okay, I just wanted to say that if any one of us has a project that perhaps other people would want to join, would you be prepared to put that on your website, Laurence?
Sure, we can.
Okay, that would be great, because that would be a way to sort of get into next steps.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just show you the book that Gilles was referring to. It's called Listening to Indigenous Voices.
Yes, thank you.
I know in our on Manitoulin Island, we made sure every parishioner knew about
internet issues. That's too bad, but
Synod's bishop, and we gave them information. We've been working on it, and yes, not everybody's going to participate, but they have the knowledge of it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So I think we will, mindful of the time, we're just a little bit over already. We'll just finish by maybe this prayer of the Adsumus. We can now just pray together, and then also Jose will show you on the screen a very quick survey where you can respond with just one question. But we'll just pray this, and you can either mute yourselves or unmute yourself, whatever. But we're going to just pray this together so that we really commend the rest of the journey to the Holy Spirit, so that the Spirit might inspire us personally and together to move forward on this great endeavor. We stand before you, Holy Spirit, as we gather in your name.
Gather together in your name.
With you alone to guide us.
Make
yourself
in our hearts.
Teach us the way we must go. And how we are weak. Do not let us promote disorder.
Let ignorance
take us down the wrong path, nor partially our actions. Let us find in you our unity, so that we may journey together and not stray from the way of truth and what is right. All this we ask of you, who are at work in every place and time, in the communion of the Father and the Son, forever and ever. Amen. Okay.